So this is always one of the fun panels. We've already started off on a good foot, but I'd like to welcome Jeanette Jarvis, Selena Larson, Jen Osborne to the stage to, well, I guess the haters are just going to hate, right? So, but anyway, it's time for a little bit of swiftiness, so I will turn it over to them for a little bit of fun before lunch.
Lovely. Thank you, Michael. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with us at this panel before lunch. Hopefully you can stay awake before your nutrients. As Taylor Swift says, so it's going to be forever or it's going down in flames, which I feel like is a very apt sentence for cybersecurity and our current industry and some of the challenges that we face. So I am very pleased to present this panel, which is our 5th year. Every year we get together, we do this panel, and we always choose a musician and some of their songs to guide us through some very important discussions about cybersecurity in the landscape, information sharing, and challenges that we face as an industry and potential solutions to those challenges. So Kathy was supposed to join us. Unfortunately, like many of us, had travel challenges getting to Virus Bulletin. So I am your MC for the day today, taking the role of Kathy. But before we dive into it, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. My name is Selena Larson. I'm a staff threat researcher at Proofpoint, and I focus on cybercrime, mostly focusing on emails and initial access. Jeanette?
Thank you, Selena. Is that on? I'm the Chief Business Officer at the Cyber Threat Alliance. In that capacity, I'm responsible for a myriad of things, such as recruitment of partners and membership, our marketing comms efforts, and just general business operations. So if you're interested in joining CTA, I'm the one.
And I'm Jen Osborne. I am the new, Chief Cyber Intelligence Officer at Dataminr. And I'm working there now to help spread how Dataminr actually has a lot of cyber threat intelligence that is incredibly useful to organizations, but not too many people know about it. So that is my job currently, and working on the product for pen testing and all that fun stuff.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much, ladies. And we're going to actually kick it off with one of my favorite songs, which is I Knew You Were Trouble. And that topic that we're going to discuss is about social engineering. So I think that currently in the threat landscape, social engineering is really still a go-to tactic. And as we've gotten better from a technological defense perspective, threat actors have had to adapt and get a lot better at essentially hacking our brains. There's been some really interesting, unique innovations in the social engineering types of threats. I think ClickFix is a fantastic example. There was a talk here about it actually, or maybe it's later today. But essentially, forcing people to infect themselves by providing instructions and scaring them into taking a risky action. And as we are thinking about the threat landscape and this idea of the sort of human factor and how can we better defend against some of these threats, we have to incorporate the human into it as well. And I think that attackers are getting a lot better at social engineering. They're getting a lot like the snake oil salesman of old, convincing people and social engineering them into taking risky actions and preying on human vulnerabilities. It's not about technological vulnerabilities. It's about our emotions. It's about our fear. It's about our excitement. It's about our anxiety. And unfortunately, as we've seen with the growth of things like pig butchering, with the growth of telephone-oriented attack delivery, people posing as IT to socially engineer them over the phone, there's been this vast expanse of the threat landscape and the techniques that have been used firmly rooted within social engineering. And I think that there is an overlap in the improved social engineering with the expansion of artificial intelligence. And we just listened to a talk that was like, AI is not very good at programming, except with Python and except if you know what you're doing. But what it is good at actually is developing and creating believable lures for vulnerable people to engage with this type of content. But Jeanette, I know you have a lot of thoughts about AI in our current landscape, and I'm curious, what you think about that in the scope of social engineering and how we are potentially in trouble.
Yeah, thank you, Selena. Well, obviously, when I think of I Knew You Were Trouble, I think of AI, right? Because it does make things so much easier to fool the human. It makes social engineering more fine-tuned. And so we're able to take advantage of vulnerable people. I think the one thing I noticed recently with AI was it's taking away, in some cases, the critical thinking capabilities of folks. And one example I have is we asked someone to write a blog, and they did write a blog, a college student in a great college, and the blog was completely written by AI. So if college students are taking the cheap way out, that's kind of scary, especially a grad student. So ultimately, we want these students to be thinking of fresh new ideas and not leveraging AI for the easy way out. Additionally, I think with AI that there's not a lot of validation between the answers that you're getting, and that really concerns me. I do want to give an example. I used ChatGPT recently preparing for this panel. I thought I would give it a prompt, pretty basic prompt. I asked it to give me an update on the state of ransomware. And it did give me quite a long, detailed report, but it only went up to 2023. Now, granted, I could have added additional prompts to make it more current, but the next follow-up was, can you make it more current? This is, you say 2023, but it's 2025. And it directed me to go to cybersecurity vendor sites if I wanted an update. And so, what good was that? That didn't help me at all. Additionally, AI concerns me about the deep fakes. It's just so simple nowadays to create a deep fake, and people are fooled. I mean, we see it every day on social networks. People are just easy to be manipulated and fooled, and I think deep fakes are going to get us in more and more trouble. Jen, what do you think?
I have some similar concerns, especially from the AI component. I know I've seen it increasingly used, especially for like business communications, things that kind of go out to the press or out to the field. And in every case where they've been run by me first, A, I usually rewrite them because they're awful. And then B, there's always some weird random either hallucinated stats or things they pulled from some random vendor piece from a company that's like maybe still in business, but it was a really big percentage number, so it got pulled. But for anyone that was reading it that's in the industry would be like, no. And now I know all of this is useless because your stats are useless. And it was one of those things where, taken by AI, everyone else was like, oh yeah, that's great. And they get in front of someone who actually does the job. And it's like, no, just no. But without that background knowledge, it looked fine.
Mm-hmm. Well, shall we move on to shake it off?
Yes. So following on that topic, and this is something I think I've said every time we've done the panel, one of the things I'd really like to see vendors kind of shake off is using secure code by design or secure by design as a buzzword and actually starting to do it. As we're seeing now with especially being able to use AI to automatically script looking for vulnerabilities, it's not really an option at this point. I mean, as an organization, you can do that yourselves before the attackers do it. And that needs to happen now because simply with the speed we have attackers looking for vulnerabilities, it's not an option anymore to ship something with them because you're basically guaranteeing your customers are compromised, pretty much like right off the bat.
Yeah, and the things I'd like to see changed relate to that as well. So this year alone, so far, one large platform that almost everybody uses has released over 800 vulnerabilities. And that's just simply too much to prioritize and address. And not only that, I mean, from an enterprise, it's a lot easier, but when you're a small and medium business, what are you going to do? You don't have the resources, you don't have the expertise, you don't even know what to prioritize. You don't have the capability to determine what is really going to affect you or not in most cases. And it's just simply unattainable to keep your platforms up to date anymore. And that's just one platform. That's crazy. It's like how, and not only that, if we're not building secure software from the beginning, and the end user is the one that's compromised, where's the liability? It's the end user that has to pay the price for lost data, for lost money, for their credentials being stolen. Last week, for about the 10th time this year, I got a letter in the mail, this one from a medical facility that was breached, and informing me. And what they did is they gave me a credit check, or what's it, a credit check for a year, along with the 10 others I got already this year. It's like, it's not going to do me any good. And what's the cost to me if my credentials are stolen? You as the company that was breached and didn't secure my data, they have no liability. In some cases, that happens. The Equifax, what did they give everybody? $15, and here your credentials are out. It's just there's the emphasis on liability isn't strong enough, in my opinion.
That brings up an interesting point that I think about a lot is the lack of consequences. So from our perspective, and it kind of goes to the initial theme of oh, it's going to be forever, it's going down in flames. As a threat researcher, as somebody who's looking at this all the time, as somebody who on the side gives senior cyber education presentations and hears literally every time someone getting scammed, there are real human beings behind all of this. And every time somebody is impacted, there is a human consequence. And they feel bad and they cry and they lose their life savings or, however much they lose. And there's the onus is on them as the victim. What do? Oh, I report it. What happens when I report it? Nothing. And unless you have somebody who is, very well connected or engaged and can help you recover some of these things or prevent it from happening in the first place, you're kind of floundering. And to me, it breaks my heart when there is all of this focus on, something like espionage or nation state activity, and that is the focus. And we as a cybersecurity industry are constantly injecting espionage into our veins and publishing it and being a national security threat when millions of people all around the world are impacted regularly with crime. If we saw every single day before our eyes somebody getting their purse snatched and beaten down in the street, we would do something about it. We would say, how do we solve this problem? But because it's this sort of digital ecosystem, we sort of imagine this digital boogeyman. And a lot of us as in the cybersecurity industry are like, oh, well, that's just fraud. That's just scams. I think, what we've seen, for example, who had travel issues on the way over here? I did. I was sitting on the floor. Hey, Pasquale, real bad. But I think when we are physically impacted and having people's lives disrupted constantly by cybercrime and having no real actual consequences for these types of activities, it can be very, very difficult. And people just get so desensitized and live in a world where crime is normal. Like digital crime, scams, fraud. I ask the elderly folks that I'm talking to, who here has been scammed, and every single one of them raises their hands. Every single one. And whether it's a romance scam or pig butchering, investment scam, or a grandparent scam, it's, we're in this space where there's just this lack of accountability and a lack of education for trying to learn these things. And so if I could change anything, I would change this idea that the biggest, baddest threats are nation state actors. They're bad, yes, but spies are going to spy. And we are in a society where crime has become so normalized that every time I talk to people, they either have been a victim of it or know that they've been a victim of it. And I hope that the tide is changing. I think Gonzalo gave a great, fantastic presentation about private sector, public sector collaboration, actual handcuffs on people, how we can disrupt this. And I would really like to see that movement continue.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like we're numb to it all. It just happens every day. It's common, and it shouldn't be. That shouldn't be the case, honestly. Well, let's move on to the Wildest Dreams. The future of cybersecurity. Now, obviously, the Wildest Dreams lyrics in Taylor Swift's song don't really relate to cybersecurity at all. But let's just use the topic. Let's use our title. And for me, when I think of the future of cybersecurity, I want to think about, again, secure by design. I know you're not a fan of the actual wording, but I think we need to stop prioritizing speed, market share, and features and start building secure software from the ground up. Too many vendors put in arbitrary deadlines because maybe RSA is coming up and you want to release a new product. And so you rush it out the door. And then after it's released, you tend to focus more on feature development and not on building the secure software. And we need to do a better job of that. I think we need to use the same level of rigor and design that we use in mission critical software in our programs and our apps, because it's just a mess right now. I mean, again, like Microsoft had, or I wasn't going to say the platform. Oops.
We all knew who it was.
One platform had over 800 vulnerabilities so far this year, and that's crazy. How is anybody supposed to keep up with all that? Addressing the cost, the impact, the risk after install is hundreds times more expensive than building the software secure from the beginning.
So my favorite Wildest Dreams is I'd really, really like to see marketing departments start using Attack for what we designed it for. It is not a check all the boxes. It is not a, I don't even know what they're doing at this point. I see it and it just makes me angry. Like we designed it on purpose to make defenders' lives easier. And that means you get the least amount of boxes that you need for the best level of protection. And I love that it's been adopted and gone crazy, but seriously, that's what it's meant for. It is not meant for anything but here is the best way you can possibly defend your network based on the threats that you are facing. So yeah, you really don't want to collect them all. You want to collect as few as possible to be effective.
Well, so from like a vendor perspective in terms of like testing and like marketing, you mean?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And the results, like, we got a perfect on the, congratulations, you have a web page. Like, that's not the part you should be celebrating. I'm actually really happy to see that MITRE's changing their evaluations this year to make it more realistic and kind of forcing vendors to then be more realistic about how they present it versus we're the best ever because we got 100 on our test this time.
Do you think that being able to detect like certain T codes within the MITRE attack framework is more important than being able to detect as many as possible?
Yes, very much so.
Excellent. Well, and I did really like how the previous presentation was talking about mapping those T codes to like the potential use cases for like programming and from like an attacker perspective, because like there are. It so like kind of flips the script a little bit because I feel like as defenders we focus on it a lot, and it's like a very useful framework if you're using it correctly, and not just like trying to use it as like a checkbox metric, but like an actual practical intelligence application of like useful tooling. Yeah, so being able to like prioritize and use it that way is super effective. And I think kind of on that note actually too, speaking of marketing. One of my wildest dreams is that we get away from capitalism driving security decisions. In my opinion, like having every single thing come down to like how much money will this make me, without weighing the cost of like a future potential attack, has actually made organizations, in my opinion, I think like less secure. There's this idea of like, well, we want to protect our business. Where can we cut costs? How can we be, making as much money as possible? And cybersecurity is very expensive, if you're doing it correctly, hopefully. And I think that when we live in this space of, we want to make as much money as possible, that's contradictory to we want to make our users as safe as possible. And we want to be able to protect people as much as possible. And I think there's fundamentally an altruistic element of cybersecurity in the same way that you have an altruistic element of healthcare, or, like education. And a lot of these things cost a lot of money, but we've invested in them as a society because we believe that they are so important that we have to focus on that. And so I know that's like a completely wildest dream. It's never going to happen. Like, but we can dream, because I think that, we're like, when we're so hyper focused on like how much is this going to cost me? Will I just pay it? And who cares about the actual like end user, because it just comes down to money instead of people. I think that just makes us all less safe, and we're not going to be able to prioritize secure by design. We're not going to be able to prioritize, moving away from marketing use cases of attack if we're only thinking about it in terms of money and the amount that we can make out of people. And so, changing our mindset away from this is a like fundamental business decision to this is a societal good and benefit, I think it can really change like how we're thinking about cybersecurity. And the other the other thing too, because when we're thinking about like capitalism driving cybersecurity, it's like there's AI everywhere. So my other wildest dream, which is actually a lot more practical, is that we build in safeguards for a lot of this stuff that we're building and developing. And I think that right now it's very much like a Wild West use case. And what we saw appear was it's not necessarily always effective in terms of like developing malware. You still need to have like a fundamental, like understanding of what it is that you're doing. But from the perspective of like we're seeing an exponential growth of phishing emails that are written by generative AI. Where are the safeguards in place that are preventing that from happening? And how can we be using our knowledge and the existing threats and threat research to incorporate better safeguards within artificial intelligence, not just in the cyberspace, but in the meat space as well. I mean, we were talking about the articles about the class action lawsuits against various AI companies because of the information that they provided to the individuals for self-harm. And, we're in this space where, again, it's a big money grab and there's a lot of like business interest in this, but we're lacking the fundamental protections. And we saw this with cloud too. Like everyone moved to the cloud. It was like an entire new attack space. And guess what happened? It was, we had a bad time for a while. And that's finally kind of coming up to par, I think, with like host-based security as well, EDR. But from AI, it's like we're opening this whole new door of a potential attack space with limited safeguards, and the opportunity for exploitation, both in cyberspace and in meat space, is there. So I think, having this a sort of ethical human mindset when developing tooling can be super, super effective. But again, yeah, big dreams. One day, one day it will happen. And I think this kind of also speaks to, like collective action, and brings us to our end game, our final song, which is, of course, end game. What is the end game? We want to impose costs on adversaries. We want to make their lives a lot harder. And if we're removing this, we're just trying to do things as fast as possible, not thinking about the actual outcomes or impacts of what we're doing and enabling. We can have a collective defense and follow that model of what Gonzalo was talking about with like these public-private partnerships, actually imposing costs on our adversaries. And what we've seen, and I mentioned this yesterday in my talk, is that when you have very collaborative interactions between law enforcement and the private sector, as well as individuals who have been impacted and are actually reporting a lot of this stuff, you can shift, like have an actual shift within the landscape itself. It's forcing adversaries to change their behaviors. It's forcing them to use new tools, new tactics. You're kind of guiding them into a space that you control. And in doing that, I think you are able to better anticipate what's coming next. You increase the fear of the threat actors and maybe make them change their own minds and behaviors. And then you are also having a lot of success stories about, okay, we can finally like put handcuffs on somebody and have these big impacts. But Jen, I know that you have like a really interesting thought on how we can actually impose costs in a way that isn't necessarily like just doing takedowns, but
yeah, it's investing in better, more proactive security to start pricing most of the adversaries out of the game. Like the people that are making a ton of money right now, make their lives hard. Make it difficult for them to still be able to do this and do it successfully. And that's sometimes being arrested, but a lot of times it's you take the money away, or you make it so prohibitively expensive or dangerous that people don't want to do it anymore. The ones we're always going to be stuck with are nation states. They're never going anywhere. They're going to stay financed. But the criminal aspect is a whole nother ballgame because they're only doing this because A, it's still really easy, and B, they're making a ton of money. But if we focus on that and price them out of the game and make their lives hard, then we can go back to focusing on what we're never going to get rid of. And it significantly decreases the number of incidents that we're going to have to all respond to.
Well, I was just going to ask, can you give an example of pricing out the adversaries? Like what should we be necessarily, or like what should we be focusing on? Like infrastructure costs, or what do you think?
Infrastructure is good. More partnerships with the finance industry, I've found that to be very successful. There's a lot of things that banks and financial institutions can do behind the scenes if they have the data that they need to do it, including clawing back funds. But that involves the partnership and the willingness to share that information, which a lot of times is the stopgap, because no one wants to admit to it. They don't want to share that information. But the only way we stop or fight crime is if we know it's happening.
Yeah, and I think, FSISAC's doing a great job, but a lot of banks are small banks, right? And they just don't have the resources or capability of sharing that information or knowing even, I think, that who they can share it with, right? Yeah. Well, I'm going to wrap this up talking about CTA. So just as the internet has brought us all together to communicate easily with our friends and family around the world, we can also do a better job of mobilizing against the bad actors. And I think this is what's happening with the CDAC. So the CDAC is the Cyber Defense Assistance Collaborative, where industry experts and vendors are working together to help Ukraine protect themselves against cyber attacks and all those cyber efforts from the Russia war. We can do a better job of addressing other events like that if we are better at mobilizing. And CTA is an awesome opportunity where we, we are an umbrella nonprofit organization to the industry, and our members share intelligence in real time and near real time to better protect their customers. I always like to say our customers are better protected because you're going to get access to threat intelligence you don't normally have. And I think our members are walking the talk, right? Obviously, you mentioned about the money, right? I mean, everybody wants to make money, but what is the ultimate mission that you're doing? And it's to protect your end users and protect the digital ecosystem. And the only way we can do that is by working together. And CT has built or fostered a trusted community where you can do that safely. And we're only stronger together. So please join us.